Hi everyone, this is the second in our series of Trust Talks, where we are really pleased to be joined by trust leaders, explaining to us or just sharing some of their experience, some of the successes they've had, some of the challenges, and some of the ideas hopefully that are going to be really interesting to share with all of you who are joining us today. So my name is Tamsin Moore. I have been at Renaissance for just over 5 years, and really excited today to be joined by Ben McGarry from Outwood Grange. So Ben, I'm going to pass over so you can introduce yourself, what your role is, and if you can tell us a little bit about Outwood Grange as well for those of us or those on the call who maybe are not so familiar with your trust.
Yeah, thanks, Tamsin. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben McGarry. So I'm the Director of English for the primary academies in Outwood Grange Academies Trust. Been in this role for 5 years, but worked for Outwood for 10 years. Started my journey as a Year 5 class teacher, and then opportunities were just kind of presented to me, and here I am in the director role, really. So Outwood is, for those of you that don't know, it's a primary and secondary sponsor. We have 13 primaries, all in the north of England, so Yorkshire and North Links mainly, and we work closely with our secondary schools as well, but we are... I'll be talking just about the primary model, really. So there's a counterpart for me for maths, for the wider curriculum, for early years, and for SEND as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. So what we really want to talk to you today about is obviously your role, what you've done across the trust, and in particular your reading curriculum. So hopefully that's something that we can really dig into today. So I wanted to talk the current reading curriculum as you have it. If you can give us a bit of an overview, what does that look like? I know consistency is a massive thing that you talk about a lot across the trust. So if you can talk a little bit about what that reading curriculum looks like and the journey to get there. So sort of, how long did it take? What has been the process to get to the point you're at now?
Yeah, so I think if I kind of talk you through the journey, it kind of leads us to where we are at this moment in time. So as I mentioned, I started this role 5 years ago. And the reason the role came about as Director of English was that we wanted an innovative reading strategy. So in order to get the role, I had to pitch that to my Chief Executive Principal, say why I thought this would be a good idea. And it was all based around something that was happening at the time, which was a big shift from carousel guided reading and moving more into whole class approaches, where it was a bit more teach from the front, all children are exposed to similar or the same texts. So the idea was that we'd shift away from small group reading for 15, 20 minutes a day, and we'd have half an hour everyday protected time that was taught from the front. Every child would access the same text, and then they would answer some questions on that. So the development that happened as a result of moving to a whole class model is that we had to skill up a lot of teachers in how to design questions rather than just verbally asking them and expecting oral responses from pupils. We wanted children to be able to record them. We kind of looked at year 6 and worked backwards and thought, well, in year 6, they're expected to perhaps answer a 3-mark question, which requires some inference with backup with evidence. And how do children write that down? Because sometimes we'll find our most articulate children couldn't record the answer, and therefore were missing out on meeting the standard, not through their lack of reading knowledge, but because the complexities of the test and test technique were getting in the way. So we did a lot of CPD with teachers around question design, how to focus question designs on particular domains. So if you know that the children are struggling with inferencing, how can you tease that out of them? How can you write progressive questioning? So that's where we focused our efforts in the first instance. Around the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, down in early years and Key Stage 1, we were in the process of becoming an English hub at Outwood Primary Academy Lofthouse Gate because of our real success there, always in the high 90s or 100% for phonics because of the read-write ink strategy. So I guess now is a good time to talk about how in Outwood we always try and do a small-scale pilot before we scale anything up. So the whole class guided reading, before I implemented it, was a small pilot, and at Lofthouse Gate, that was the pilot for Read Write Ink. We knew it was working, and then from there we scaled it up across the trust, and that became part of every principal's development plan. It became part of English leaders' accountability as well. So Read Write Inc was being implemented. We saw the success of phonics quite quickly because the program is very rigorous, very consistent. We then tried to mirror that in years 3-4 and year 5-6. And then the most recent iteration of the reading model is that we've revisited years 2, 3, and 4 and really tried to build in a fluency model. So the idea here is that children are exposed to the same text over the course of a week. Similar to Read Write Inc, they have 3 reads of the text. As Tamsin mentioned, at Outwood, we believers in consistency, so children don't have to unlearn to relearn something. That means that they're using that same nomenclature, the same language for Read Write Inc as they are for guided reading. It's not something different. So we looked at a Think Out Loud, which is a Read Write Inc strategy. Then we looked at the second read being echo reading, partner practice. We looked at research that was around at the time for the best fluency practice that was out there. Shot and Hall did a great paper, which is, I think it's a 5-minute read. It's not very long. And they talked a lot about echo reading and that model that's provided and how you build in an internal storyteller's voice. We really liked that. So that was our focus in year 2, 3, and 4. And then eventually the back end of the week would still focus on those comprehension questions. So the idea really is that we're building on the success of Read Write Inc over time, but also looking ahead to year 6 and the barriers that children will face in such as academic language, things like the word impression. What impression do you get of this character? Can you justify this? So we made sure that we're exposing children to that kind of language all the way down in Key Stage 1, hopefully creating a coherent journey. And we'll see the fruits of that as the model comes through, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so clear and coherent, like you said, and really thought through. And it's great to sort of see that journey year on year, I guess, for the children as well. It makes sense if the same things are happening, the same language you spoke about as they move through. You mentioned there your English hub. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And I think you recently had a big success at your English hub. So
yes, so Lofthouse Gate is one of our longest standing academies. It was one of the first to convert when we were just 3 academies in Wakefield. As I've said, it's had Read Write Inc there for a long time. The Read Write Inc trainers that used to come in would speak to the staff, and they weren't sure if they were teaching assistants or teachers because the CPD for everybody was the same and they were very highly skilled. We've been lucky enough, if you can call it that, to have several Ofsteds this year. I think it's 6 this academic year. Lofthouse being the last one. And it came out as outstanding in all areas, which we're really, really pleased with. You know, we don't underestimate how difficult it is to achieve that standard in the current climate. But they dipped their toe into phonics. We knew they'd be happy with that because we've had lots of external visitors to the school who have taken a lot of that practice away with them. But they also identified lots of other things that we do as part of our strategy, that having a pair of external eyes it was good to hold up that mirror really to our practice, because sometimes I think when you are the ones doing it, you don't always see what somebody who's new to what you're doing might observe. So they noticed that the reading ambassadors were a key strength, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the reading ambassadors, they've come out in every Ofsted report, which are our pupil ambassadors for reading. The guided reading strategy, that we focused on fluency and that we haven't undermined anything. I think the inspector's words on the ground were, I can see it's totally consistent, so pupils are getting a good deal with that. So yeah, it was a really proud moment for us, and it was a little bit of a rubber stamp to say, we're not doing it for Ofsted, but actually these people come to quality assure our schools and they've seen it at its best. So we know that this works. So now we can double down and really kind of just refine our practice, really.
Absolutely. Amazing. Well, congratulations. We know it's a lot of pressure when those moments come. So I'm sure it's a big relief for everyone as well, even though, like you say, you're feeling confident going in, particularly around certain areas.
Yeah, busy few days.
Yeah. Yeah, just what you need at the end of the year. in terms of this curriculum approach and bringing it in and that consistency across all of the schools, how has that been received? Being part of the trust, is that something that the English leads, the different leaders at the schools really value? And what does that look like at a trust level in terms of maybe getting people together to discuss the different strategies or share ideas? How's it kind of gone down at school level?
I think the way that we work is very collaboratively. It's not a case of, for want of a better phrase, Ben says this, so that's what we need to do. It's never a top-down approach. We always make sure that we're using the expertise on the ground. I think that's a real success of what we do. So, for example, to furnish the reading curriculum, we needed the text that would underpin it. So we decided on some core non-negotiable text that we would use across every year group. We don't believe in education being a postcode lottery. Actually, if you're in an Outwood school, that means you're going to get the same deal. So one of the things that we sat down as a group of English leads and did was to refine our kind of core spine of text, if you like. And everybody had an input on, well, actually, we've used the Iron Man in this year group for several years and it's working really well. Well, that's great. Let's keep that. But then we also explored other aspects, such as the protected characteristics and how we could ensure that more children could see diverse characters, diverse plots, that they could read about diverse experiences from authors from different backgrounds to their own. But also some of our schools are quite multicultural. Some are in very, very disadvantaged areas. So actually we wanted them to be able to see themselves in the books as well. We wanted a mixture of those. So we really explored that as a team. And I think that really helps when you're trying to deliver that on the ground, that teachers who, for want of a better phrase, are at the coalface are the people who have helped inform those decisions. Likewise, the whole class guided reading was trialled not by me, but it was trialled by several teachers across our academies who then fed back, and that then formed the model. A lot of the fluency practice was put into place by colleagues in some of our other schools. So everybody's played a part and everybody's a cog in the wheel that is the curriculum. And I think everybody feels that they've had some part to play in that, because that's what we want it to feel like, that it's a collaborative effort, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so important to then get that buy-in and everyone's really engaged with it, and it doesn't just come down from the top. It is actually, no, we all want to do this together.
I think the other thing is just having that research base behind what the decisions that you're making, because I know historically in the past we said, oh, I really enjoy doing this, so we're going to do this as a school. And sometimes it's, well, is it going to have the impact everywhere, or is it because that person's really passionate and enthusiastic about it? Or is it because that person's always done that seems to work really well? I think education is shifting to a more evidence and research-based approach, and rightly so. We want to see that what we're doing is approved and has worked elsewhere. But that doesn't stop us from innovating. You know, if new research comes out, we look at that and we always reflect on what we're doing and think, is there a way we can go again? Is there a way we can be even better at what we do? Because while we're proud of it, and, you know, that Ofsted at Lofthouse Gate is a fantastic result, we still want more because we want the best for our children. And if that means looking at different aspects in the future, then we would absolutely do that.
Absolutely. Every time I talk to you, Ben, you mention something new and exciting that you've done across the trust, just to engage children with reading. So you mentioned briefly your reading ambassadors. I know you do like a news day. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other things you do just to build that engagement from a child point of view, and how does it help that all of the schools are doing the same thing and you've got that consistency? What does that kind of allow you to do as a trust?
Yeah, I think the consistency, as you mentioned right at the start of this, is the key. Because if people, both students and teachers, weren't doing the same thing at the same time, these opportunities wouldn't be available. So the reading ambassadors is a role that pupils have to apply each year, and then they go to interview with the English lead in that school, and they have to kind of sell themselves, really, in effect, as to why they are the champion for reading in their class or their year group. And then from that, they then get a pin badge. What child doesn't love a pin badge? But they also get opportunities to do things like author Q&As, if an author visits a school, they get the VIP section at the front, they do the welcome, they do the meet and greets, they put initiatives in place, they run the assemblies about reading. So we're really trying to champion pupils and give them a real voice in their academy. But because they're all doing that role, they can collaborate together. So in the past, we've sent videos of, well, this is what our library looks like. We'd love to hear what your library looks like, so that English leads can learn from each other, but also students feel like they're part of that family of schools. So that's the Reading Ambassadors aspect of it. But Newsday, I think, and the anthology are our two kind of big English events. So Newsday is part of our Outwood Primary Diploma, which is where we try and go beyond what is in the classroom and beyond the national curriculum. So we give children in year 5 the opportunity to come off timetable for a day and become journalists. So they get to, well, not just journalists, they get to be journalists, editors, they get to be researchers, photographers, and they have to be part of the Outwood News group across the trust, but they have to produce a local newspaper which sits under that umbrella. So the idea is that they would research, interview, write it, edit it, publish it all in a day. So by 3:15, they have to send a tweet out on the school accounts, holding their paper, and then it goes into the hands of the parents. One of the biggest drivers for that is that we wanted to see pupils write for readers, but also read newspapers so they could become better writers for the readers of their newspaper. We wanted them to see English as this holistic subject and not something that sits in an hour here, but guided reading separate over there. So that was the rationale behind it. But then in terms of engagement, we always try and engage with somebody who's high profile or who's doing something that will have an impact for children, or somebody who's really inspiring. So the children get an opportunity to interview them. So the first year we ran it, we had Joe Wicks. It was before he went national as the nation's PE teacher. So he engaged with us and talked a lot about healthy lifestyles, which was great. And we reached out to him and he agreed to do that for free because it's a captive audience for the work that he's doing with young people. We've had Alistair Brownlee, who's linked closely with the trust, and he was brilliant at talking about resilience. We had Abigail Harrison, who's based in the States, and she's an aspiring astronaut. She's currently training to hopefully be in the first team on Mars, which is amazing. And it was a case of just sending an email. And sometimes I just think if you don't ask, you don't get. Yeah. So if you chance your arm and say, and she was publishing a book about aiming high for pupils. It was like a workbook journal type book, so they could kind of write down their goals, how they would work towards them. She was amazing. And then this year we had Ainsley Harriott, and he spoke to the children about how he had very different goals, but he ended up as a chef because it's what he enjoyed doing. And he was just amazing with the children. And when you speak to the children afterwards, it makes you realise the impact that these events can have, because a lot of them said to me, do you know what? I think I'm going to start cooking with my mum and dad in at lunchtime or at tea time, because I think I might want to be a chef now. And just that small encounter for an hour with one inspiring person can really change their lives. So that's always amazing. And then the anthology is a very similar thing. So around World Book Day, this is for all children across the trust. They're given poetry themes, so they read poems on World Book Day, and then they write their own poems, and then they're published in a trust-wide anthology. So that's just been distributed now to our academies. It goes in the entrance halls on displays. So they've read poetry, then they've written their own, and now other children can read their poetry. I just think it's nice for them to see themselves as real authors, but also for our children in year 6, they're leaving a legacy behind. So they'll always be a part of the school. And I think that's just really nice as they leave us going into year 7. If it's not into an Outwood secondary, there'll always be a part of them that sits within their primary school.
Yeah, I love it. It's such amazing kind of life skills and things which, like you say, are not just curriculum based, but are giving them a different sense of what might be out there, and that ambition of actually, I want to know I'm going to be a journalist when I grow up, because I enjoyed that so much.
I think what's been great as well is that kind of the engagement with external partners. So people like Ainsley Harriott getting involved, and Because we're based in the north of England, we asked BBC Look North to provide a briefing for the children. They shot it in the studio. And I think what I can't stress enough is how grateful we are that people take the time out to engage with our pupils, because it's that aspect that makes it really special. The idea just starts with us on the ground thinking, how can we do something a bit different? But it's really that engagement with other people that really lift it.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows, doesn't it? Like you say, you just got to be bold. You got to just send the email. You never know, someone might actually really want to get involved with an initiative that you're doing. So it's always worth asking. You mentioned there moving from year 6 to year 7, and transition obviously is such a key part of a child's journey, their approach through school. What do you do to prepare the children for transition? And is it something that you do within the trust, or do you work with secondaries in the area, particularly in terms of that reading curriculum and making that a smooth journey for the children?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting part of what we do, because in an ideal world, if all our primaries fed into the same secondary school, which was also an Outwood school, I think it would be much less complex. I wouldn't say simpler, but I think it would be less complex to really create a powerful transition model. Those that are listening that are working in multi-academy trusts, or those that are in standalone schools, will understand how difficult it can be, because every primary school might have a different curriculum, might have a different end point. So yes, we all teach World War II, but some schools might choose to teach it in year 6, some might teach it in year 5. So actually, it can be quite tricky in that respect. But I think one of the great successes for us has been having the secondary directors and the secondary teachers come and see what we do in year 6. So they come and see what books we're reading in year 6. For example, in summer 2, we read A Monster Calls. Quite a hard, difficult text, got a lot of deep themes in there, but we wanted to show the secondaries, actually, we've looked at what you're doing when you're looking at things like A Christmas Carol, and you're looking at poverty and the socio-economic climate at the time, and how dreadful it was for the poor. Well, actually, that's quite a deep and at times dark theme. So we're trying to introduce pupils to that as they leave us in year 6, so they're prepared for that kind of analysis, that kind of thematic exploration, if you like, in Key Stage 3. One of the other things that's worked really well for us is we use Accelerated Reader. Secondaries use it as well, so we can pass all that data up. We make sure that we pass as much data in terms of progress, in terms of those growth reports. We make sure that we pass on reading ages, things like that, so they're not always having to start from a baseline. Obviously, they will want to gather their own information, but they always have a starting point as well as the national assessment. So I think that's really important. And then the other thing that I think has been a real strength for us is that our secondaries come to see our phonics provision, and they've implemented the same intervention strategies. So we use the fast track tutoring from Read Write Inc. For our years 4, 5 and 6. Sometimes it's just years 5 and 6, but they use the same intervention program for years 7, 8 and 9. So it means that if we're passing on a group of students that perhaps haven't yet come off the fast track tutoring, they can then pick it up from where we left it, and it just means that they've got a more coherent journey. I still think there's some work to do. I was speaking to somebody at Huntington Research School, and they're doing Marcus Jones. He's doing a fantastic project into Key Stage 2-3 transition, and that's been supported by Leeds University. So it'll be really interesting to see what information comes out of that study and how we can better prepare children in terms of that Key Stage 2-3 transition.
Definitely. I think it's such an interesting point, and it's one that we talk to schools about a lot. You mentioned there, passing on that data. So yes, you are going to want to baseline everyone, but some children will feel very out of their depth in a big secondary school and actually might not perform as well. And then does that set them up for their whole secondary experience and sets and things like that? So having that historical data of actually, well, this is what they were consistently achieving in primary, and there might be something else going on here. This isn't necessarily the true picture of their ability. And definitely in terms of that reading as well. We spoke to a school the other week, and they were talking about sharing the accelerated reader data so that as a secondary teacher, you can actually go in and be like, oh, well, you used to really enjoy books of this theme. Let me see what's in our library. And immediately they feel that bit more welcome and that bit more at home within that school. So there's lots of opportunities there, I think. It's definitely a challenging one, as you discussed. This time of year, obviously, there's a lot going on. I know, obviously, we had the SATs results this week. How are you feeling around that? And what's a big priority maybe for you as a school going into next year? Not as a school, as a trust across the schools. What's a big priority for you as you reflect on this year and think ahead?
I think, there's been no kind of, how do I put this? It's been in the media a lot, the reading paper this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been put under a lot of scrutiny. I think that's important when we think about the context and we think about, we didn't think we would be saying this still, but actually there has still been a hangover from the pandemic in terms of academic and social recovery. But actually, we're really pleased with a lot of our schools, and particularly at Greater Depth, a lot of our children are really excelling when it comes to reading. 4 of our academies this year, based on the provisional data we've got, were over 31% plus for Greater Depth, which is amazing. 8 of our academies are above the national standard at 75% plus, which is great. But obviously that's not 13, and that's where we want to be. I think until all of our children are achieving, we won't stop until we get it right. So while I don't kind of shun away those successes, I think it's important to think about where we need to go next. And I think it's really doubling our efforts for our disadvantaged pupils. Our schools in our most disadvantaged areas are still performing slightly lower than perhaps our more affluent areas, which you might expect. That might be a prediction you make, but we don't ever want that to be the reality, because actually our disadvantaged pupils need reading the most. We know how important reading is about unlocking doors for the future, about giving them great life skills and really preparing them for adult life. So we really want to focus on that, look at strategies on how we can really support pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds, because if we can support them and it's good for them, it's good for all. So I think that's really where we want to shine the spotlight in this upcoming academic year.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure it's a feeling that many schools and academies are looking at as well. One final thing from me. I guess you've spoken a lot about many different areas that you're very proud about. Is there one thing that you would sort of pick out across the reading curriculum, across this strategy that you put in place that you really think, that's where we've had a lot of success and I'm really proud of how that's gone?
Difficult question. I think just the reading culture as a whole, and I know that term can sometimes sound a little fluffy and a little abstract, but I think one of the biggest things in terms of the implementation of the reading curriculum in our schools, whether that be phonics, whether it be the fluency practice, whether it be comprehension, is that is our reading for pleasure program. That is how we promote a love of reading. We don't see it as a bolt-on. And I think that's been a real shift in education, that it isn't just about we have half an hour to drop everything and read, or we have half an hour in the book corner. Actually, every time you're exposed to a text, we should be enthusiastic about it. We should promote it. We should show children where to find it. Lofthouse Gate, for example, their reading displays all the way through school. They're celebrating a book. So there's a display about I think it's books into films or read the movie. Actually, did you know that Jumanji used to be a picture book? And did you know you can find it in Accelerated Reader in this ATOS level? And I think it's kind of looking at all the strategies we've got and pulling those strands together, which has really orchestrated that reading culture that I'm really proud of. Our reading ambassadors, by no mean feat, are the ones who are driving it in the school alongside our English leaders. And the fact that our pupils are the people in our schools driving reading culture, that's something I'm really proud of, because that started with a discussion with myself and another colleague about, do you think we should maybe think about having a champion of reading? I don't know what we could call them. And then from that seed of an idea, it's now something that's reflected in everything that we do, every academy that we have, and in every Ofsted report that's published after an inspector has visited us, they see it as something that is special and worth sharing. So I think that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, it sounds just like an amazing program, really strong initiative. So I know you've spoken to me before about having days where other trusts can come and see what you're doing in terms of sharing some of this insight and ideas. Any top tips for other kind of trust leaders who are considering, okay, we need to look at reading, we need to look at what we're doing across the academies and getting that consistency? Any top tips to leave us with before we end today's session?
I think the first thing is just to say that at Outwood, our doors are always open. If you want to come and see what we do, we will absolutely try our best to accommodate that. Obviously, we have the English Hub. If you're engaging with the Outwood English Hub, they work very closely with us, and it is based at Lofthouse Gate. So if you want to see what we do, you're more than welcome to come and do so. I think if you've already got the starts of your own ideas, almost like the inception of your ideas, I think small scale piloting works really well. And in a previous life, I worked for the Yorkshire Humber Maths Hub, and one of the things they did really well was piloting on a small scale. We took our pilot to the EEF, and I learned a lot about kind of efficacy trials and how to work it, and thinking about control groups and things like that. And that's great if you're trying an academic study, but I think just a small scale pilot with some baseline data and some impact data to see, is it worth investing our time in, or is it worth, in some cases, investing our budget into? It's better to do that than just to throw the whole school into it if it's not going to have the impact for you and your pupils. So start small, look at the research, and then consider the best model of scaling it up. What we've found works really well for us is opening the classroom doors and saying, all Year 5 teachers across the trust, come and see our best Year 5 teaching of reading. Right, now let's unpick that. So we take half an hour afterwards, unpick it. What worked well? How would this work for your context? And then the very next day, it's in those classrooms. So while I would say don't rush into implementing it whole school, I think once you've got it right, there's not a day to waste for pupils. And if they can get a better deal by sharing that excellent practice, then I think that's the best way to go.
Amazing. And what a great way to end it. And I think that's such a benefit of being part of a multi-academy trust, is you've suddenly got all of these experts. It's not just you and your school, you've got all of these people to support. So what a great way of kind of trying to get everyone together and sharing that best practice across the trust and across the academies. Thank you so much, Ben. Anything else you want to leave people with? Just a last thought before the summer, or is it just, okay, a couple of days to go, knuckle down?
I don't think I could say anything that would make anybody want some holidays more. I think it has been a challenging year, but I hope that, in the light of SATs and the results that people have received, that wherever they are, that they can recognise the successes they've had this year. And those that are listening are probably interested in, what reading is going to look like for them next year. So just a case of wishing them all the success that is due to them. And like I said, if people want to see what we do, I'm not saying it's the way or the right way, but we are more than happy to share it, and you'd be welcome to come and see it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's joined us today, and for anyone listening back at a later date. We wish you all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please check out the Education Joining the Dots podcast from our colleagues at GL Assessment. Thank you.